These cases go by the somewhat unwieldy name of Sharkoon Elite Shark CA300T. And you'll note I have two of them, one in white and one in black. When Sharkoon said, "Do you want to review our case?" and Kitguru said, "Okay," and they said, "Do you want white or black?" and I said, "White for preference, it's easier on video than black." They said, "We'll send you both." I said, "Please don't do that, they're enormous." And lo and behold, two enormous cases. And the thing with two enormous cases is they come in even bigger boxes. So I had to unpack them, and that was a bit of a struggle. But we ended up with these two cases, which are priced slightly differently depending on where you go in the UK. Alternate, which is a website I barely know of, they are a few pennies under £146, including VAT, which is fairly expensive. I think I'm going to shift the black one off the table and tear apart the white one. But before I can do that, we have to do the peel. To get inside the case, thumb screws at the back, top panel comes off, glass lifts up. It's on pegs, I was just being a bit careful there in case it came flying out. So, one peel. Ooh, fairly satisfying. Reasonable tension, slightly noisy. For one, peel on the inside as well. Ooh. And two, lightly tinted glass. Glass panel on the rear, more peeling. And four. Okay, so the top panel, as I show, two thumb screws away it comes, heavily perforated. Beneath that we have a magnetic dust filter. Glass panel at the side, simply lifts and away. Glass panel at the back. Same deal. And there we are inside. So this is the white edition, but you can see it's a hybrid black and white, much like Fractal design. We've got a fixed power supply shroud. We've got a pump mount there, which can also accommodate a drive. A couple of SSD sleds. Around the back, we have two drive plates retained to the motherboard tray with thumb screws that can each accommodate a 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drive. Here we have a small drive tower with two caddies that can do the same. When you add in M.2 support on your motherboard, you have got enough drive capacity in this case to keep most people happy. There are cases from the likes of Fantex and Fractal that support more drives, but the Sharkoon does a perfectly satisfactory job. And here we have the front I/O on the side of the front panel. And if you've got any memory for my reviews whatsoever, in which case, frankly, I'm sorry, this is looking very familiar to you. How do I know that? Cougar Dark Blader. This core chassis and the Sharkoon core chassis are very similar. Not quite identical, but very similar. I've worked with Cougar Dark Blader on a couple of occasions, and as soon as I saw that front panel I/O, it was quite clear to me the two chassis had a great deal in common. But there are, thankfully, some detail differences. With the Cougar, I complained it did not have USB Type-C on the front I/O. Clearly, Sharkoon has used Type-C. Cougar includes one fan with the dark blader at the rear, which is a black fan, no RGB. Sharkoon provides four 120mm RGB fans. If you want to get behind the front panel to install a liquid cooler or move the fans around or some such, you have to remove the front panel, and it feels solidly attached. Here we have a hidden screw, just there in fact. And with the screw out, we can slide the panel up and off a number of other screw heads, which are in the panel on both sides, and it is firmly tethered in place. So you're not removing the panel, you're simply swinging it out of the way. The RGB fans are controlled by this 8-way ARGB fan hub. There's the connection that goes off to your motherboard. It's also got those little gigabyte adapters. So we've got 4 fans connected and 1 more device, which is going to do some lighting in the front panel. Leaves us connections for 3 more devices should we choose. The fans themselves are voltage control rather than PWM, and we've got Molex connector and a 3-way fan connector. So you could connect each of the fans direct to a motherboard, or you could, if you choose, stack up the power connectors like so and simply power them at full speed. When it comes to cooling, Sharkoon tells us we can install a 420 or 360 rad in the front, so clearly that's 3 fan units of 120 or 140. You can install a 360 or 280 in the roof, so that's 3x120 or 2x140. And you can install a 120 rad in the rear should you want. I'll pass over the rear radiator option, except just to point out that you are limited to 120, no option for a 140 fan in the rear, which when you consider the size of the case, I personally think you should have options for 120 and 140 in every cooling location. I have removed this cable management plate that goes in this location to give you a clear view of everything that's going to go on here. The 420 at the front, first thing to point out here is you're limited by the fixed power supply shroud to 30mm radiators. The available space actually behind the fans is 35mm or so. So forget about slightly thicker radiators, 45. Definitely forget about monsters such as this 60mm thermal take. Now you put the 60mm by 360 rad in any location, in any case, and you can pretty much cool any hardware you want. Clearly, that ain't an option for all sorts of reasons. I mean, it's going to completely muck up, for example, access to your pump res mount. So thick radiators, forget them. Let's start with the 420 option. So we're talking 3x140. Now, to my mind, this makes very little sense in this case. You're supplied with 3x120 fans in the front, so even though you have 140mm options, the idea you're going to pull out those 3x120s doesn't strike me as very likely. You might, because you might move them to the roof, but my instinct would be you're sticking with 120mm fan units. You take your 420 radiator, you offer it up, it goes in the opening. How does it go in here? Okay, let's put it in the case. Okay, how's that going to work? I'm not actually clear how you're supposed to install the 420. If I was to pull off the front panel and remove the fans, screw heads being on that side of things, so I open up this 25mm space at the front. I'm going to say I could probably wiggle it into place. But considering the size of the case and the boast that this case supports a 420 radiator, that strikes me as not great. But let's say you can install a 420, but you don't want to because 3x140s means you've got to move the fans around. Let's move on to the 360 options. So this is an Alphacool Nexus ST30 V2. It's a very compact radiator. Now clearly you want the unions at the top because down the bottom they're hidden in the power supply shroud. That drops in beautifully. And the fans are pretty much fixed in position. You haven't got full height slots. They've got a little bit of wiggle room, but very little. That rad is going to go in that location there, which is absolutely fine. That is a tidy job. I'll be happy with that. I might even do that when I do my build, not quite sure yet. In the roof, I can obviously put fans and no radiator if I want, but this case explicitly supports dual radiators. If we take this 360 crossflow gives you more options for where your unions go, and we put that in up top, like so. The union is in front of the rad, which means that connecting the two radiators together would be tricky. If instead of the crossflow I go for a conventional Alphacool 360, again a V2, again very compact. If I put the unions up the front, pull it all the way back, again it overlaps. If I put the unions to the rear, clearly that's going to work. It now means, however, one of the hoses or tubes is going to have to feed all the way from the back, all the way to the front. So 420 at the front strikes me as a poor option. Dual 360s similarly. If I grab up a 240, and again that's an Alpha Cool V2, and if I put that in the roof of the case, now we've got all the space in the world. Realistically, you are restricted to 30mm radiator thicknesses and either a big rad in the front, small rad in the roof, or big rad in the roof, small rad in the front, or of course one radiator either in the front or in the roof. I'm just about to start building a test PC inside this Sharkoon. I thought, no, I'm going to have to check this 420mm radiator thing. So I've removed the cable plate, I've taken out the pump bracket, I've removed the fans from the front, which involves taking the front panel off. Here we have the 420 radiator. So it seems to me you can indeed put the rad in place, and then you're going to have to install the fans from the side and then screw them in. So yes, technically the Sharkoon supports a 420 radiator. Personally, I would not be going down that route. Anyway, on with the test PC. We're using an Intel Core i9-10900KF processor on a Gigabyte Z490 Aorus Master motherboard. Cooling is custom loop on both the CPU and the GPU. CPU block is an EK Quantum Velocity. SSD is a 1TB WD Blue M.2 NVMe. Memory is 32GB of Gigabyte Aorus RGB DDR4 4400 MHz. Power supply is a Seasonic Prime Titanium 850 watt. The case comes with 4 Sharkoon 120mm ARGB fans. We've added 2 Be Quiet Shadow Wings 2s in the roof. Nominal speed of all these fans is 1100 RPM. For the radiator, we have a 360mm Alpha Cool Nexus ST30. We're using a Sharkoon vertical graphics card kit, pump reservoir, an EK Quantum Kinetic with a D5 pump. Graphics card is a Palette RTX 3080. GPU block is an Alpha Cool Ice Block Aurora. Fittings are by Alpha Cool. Coolant is Alpha Cool O-Cool Ultra Clear Tech Protect. To my mind, the finished PC looks good, looks imposing, looks impressive, and is pleasing to the eye. However, whether you, for example, like the pattern in the front panel is entirely a matter of choice. To my mind, it looks fairly crude. On the plus side, it clearly flows air because you can see the mesh that's directly behind it, and that has to be a good thing. If it was all glazed, that would possibly look better, but you know, from a thermal point of view, it'd be a disaster. Airflow is perfectly decent. The 4 fans that come with the Sharkoon and the 2 Be Quiets that I've added all run around the 1100 RPM mark. I didn't have to add any fans in the roof, it just looked bare. Had the fans available, made sense to add them in. The fans are currently running at full speed. That's 6 1100 RPM fans. I'll go quiet for a moment. And you can't hear it. While the major components are absolutely fine, there are detail issues. So you pull off the top panel. Underneath you have the magnetic top filter, and then you have, in this instance, 2 Be Quiet fans. The fasteners that Be Quiet uses are like push pins rather than screws. Nonetheless, the heads protrude just as any fasteners would, which means when the filter's in place, it's bulging, and then when you want to put the top cover on, you have to cram it down before you can slide it home. It's fairly obvious that's going to be an issue regardless of what you install on the roof of the case. There are mounts for 120-140 fans radiators, therefore you're going to put something there potentially, and yet they haven't taken account of that. This side of the case looks absolutely fine. Swing it around the back. And this glass panel has a sort of a painted modesty section to cover cable gubbins. So this side actually looks a lot better than it might otherwise do. So we've got the cables covered by that painted section, and we've got this swinging cover which covers the rest of the mess. Now you might argue having a second glazed panel on this side of the case is a fairly stupid thing to do. We've made that point a great many times. Manufacturers seem to love the symmetry of glazing on both sides. If you're going to have glazing, you don't really want to let a cable mess on show. This approach works. One point it is worth making is we have the RGB hub, which works very well. Nonetheless, we don't have a fan hub, so we have an RGB hub to control potentially 6 or so RGB fans plus a couple of other RGB devices, but you need to have a motherboard with enough headers and connectors. Our Gigabyte motherboard has sufficient headers and connectors, so we're good. There are plenty of boards out there with 3 or 4 headers. To my mind, if you're going to have an RGB hub, it would be good to also have a PWM hub. Thermals for the CA300T are perfectly decent. However, in a case of this size, I would expect thermals to be absolutely stellar. I've used high-end hardware, I've got a 360 rad, a proper pump, and yet it's merely okay. I put that down to the low fan speeds. I'm quite sure if I had the option of running the fans fast and 1100 RPM that would help, but the biggest thing has to be that these fans are, I would class them as being airflow fans, not even a hybrid design. In other words, if you're going for liquid cooling and you put these fans up against your rad, they don't generate the pressure to push the air through the radiator. In the event you install an AIO that comes with its own fans, you might want to put that in the roof of the case, which means that the front fans will then be working as pure airflow to get air into the case, and then the AIO would handle the airflow through the rad. I've used Sharkoon's fans with the alpha cool radiator, and that combo may not be the best. The results are okay. I'm quite certain they could be better in this case. Overall, I'm not unhappy with the CA300T. There are details here and there that aren't great. The price is perhaps a tad high, but you do get a decent amount for your money. Glass on both sides, RGB, you've got the aesthetics of the front panel, which are very much a matter of personal taste, but the number of actual failings I can level against the CA300T, very few and far between. As we approach the end of a very grim 2020 for everybody, I'm going to wrap it up with the Sharkoon Elite Shark CA300T, a case that has not disappointed me.